Program 4 is the first program, first session in the winter-spring semester. We've just come back from a break. And so we do some recontracting in the workshop. The examples presented by the participants now focus on teaching research, program evaluation, and policy, courses that students aren't always eager to take. An adjunct faculty member presents at the workshop her concerns about getting ready to have her first class on program evaluation. This gives us an opportunity to do a little what I call tuning in, where we try to anticipate what might be the source of the resistance and why might students have the kinds of feelings they're about to share. Our discussion will include some strategies for addressing these issues in the first class and involving students and holding them responsibility for finding ways to make this class meaningful for them, rather than, as the adjunct instructor wants to do, trying to sell the class somewhat like a used car salesman, using enthusiasm and ignoring the underlying resistance and the meaning of that resistance. The discussion turns to how to overcome what is called a culture of negativity. A full-time faculty member gives a good example about how to connect the dots between policy and practice, and how doing that makes a positive impact on class culture. I use the example to present some ideas from John Dewey, in particular the controversial idea that knowledge really doesn't exist until the learner creates it. Following this, another participant presents her work with a BSW class at another school with a small group of difficult students. The students have even developed a negative reputation in the school. They're in their final semester, getting ready to graduate. A final example explores the problems of cliques within a class and the meaning of conflicts between older and younger students, as well as students who are coming into a BSW program from two different two-year programs.
Let's use this to start to set an agenda. I'll tell you some of my thoughts. I was trying to think, what do we do now for those people who keep coming back, on a regular basis, and at the same time do something for people who are relatively new to the seminar, first year, etc. And it occurred to me that maybe this would be a good semester once a month for me to do some thinking and presenting in context of your examples, a little bit more on groups and the issues around group development. A lot of the group theory, not necessarily teaching, but a lot of it does apply. People like Benison Shepard and Dion and Holmans and others. These are foundation theorists, people who really set the stage for understanding groups in action. And more recently, there have been some stuff out of the Stone Center with some feminist perspective on groups that I think could also be interesting. So I thought I would take on an assignment to try to infuse into our work during the semester a little bit more detailed content around groups, and that we can then look at how does that understanding help us with our work. Beyond, for example, with Fight and Flight, for those of you who are familiar with his work, know that whenever a therapeutic group, which is what he worked with, got into difficult or tense areas, two of the ways they reacted to avoid the tension was one through fight and one through flight. And we all can see that in classes as well. So I thought you might be interested, if I'm right, let me know, in a little bit more thinking about the theoretical underpinnings of our understanding of the class group, what I like to call the hidden group in the classroom. Does that sound of interest? And I will make it my job to each time try to introduce something else that might be useful.
I immediately have to say yes. That sounds absolutely relevant and important. I would love that.
You've been getting it in some ways, but you haven't been getting it in a more systematic way. And I think at this point that might make it enhance the understanding of it. It might also get you interested in going back and reading some of it, as well.
I had my first class yesterday, and it's hard that first day. They don't know each other generally very well. Nobody knows I don't know them, they don't know me. And it is this group that you have to form and get to work together, and as you've said many times, groups form within the group and different things are going on. I think you're focusing a little more specifically on groups and group theory would be extremely helpful to me.
And then we just went around, everybody said what they were teaching.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the
what you teaching?
confusion. I'm teaching the second half of human behavior, a senior methods course, and a senior seminar, all at the BSW level.
Okay. Oh. Where are you teaching?
Fredonia.
At Fredonia?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
For the year.
Recruited her.
All right, so I'll keep that in mind, and I'll plan for each session to make a brief presentation the way I've done before. And, excuse me, and if I can, I'll try to get some handouts too so you have some material. And that'll have the references.
Excellent.
So
I love
I'll
that.
do that. Well, look, people had that. Some of you had your first classes, right?
Mm-hmm. I would have.
Well, we can begin by discussing the unconscious. How that works. To help us. I was telling Rebecca before you came that last semester I had a really tough week because I was teaching this lab as well as, in the intro course. You also have a lab, which I thought was 9 to 12. It's 8 to 11. And so I'm teaching that course twice a week. I'm teaching my group work course. And I'm getting a little old for this stuff. And so Wednesday night, there's a Wednesday night. I also do a seminar presentation for our students, for the both the daytime and the nighttime students on skills of helping. And usually it's the first year on the beginning phase. 7 o'clock, I get a call from Zoe. I'm at home. She says, "Where are you?" There's a group of 30 students in this room waiting for me, and I completely wiped it out. It was in my calendar. I just wiped it out, and I thought about it later. It was just a week where
You had enough.
I had mentally this issue. And of course, I apologized when I went and I did a makeup for them, of which only 2 students came. So I think I was getting the message. Only 2 showed up for the makeup. It was not a great way to do a session on the engagement skills. Anyway, Rebecca, it happens to all of us. Anybody have something from a class that ended last semester or beginning right now that might be of interest that you'd like to use the seminar for? And then based on that, I might be able to start to present some stuff. I've got 2 volunteers. Go ahead, Shulman.
Well, this may not be applicable to everyone, but
try it.
I am just about to start, like I said, teaching the practice and program evaluation, and I heard it's a pretty full class, around 28 students. So I love research, and I have enough enthusiasm for everyone in the room, but that may not make them love it, and I will probably walk in very bubbly and excited like I normally would, but
that's first mistake. But anyway, we'll do that.
Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to engage my students into loving research as much as I do.
You got people right here who've gone through that.
I have to say, I taught research last semester.
Just before, hold on to it. Elaine, what was yours?
Oh.
I just want to get a couple.
I didn't know.
I am going to be teaching, Robin can speak to this also, a group of seniors. And I am concerned because there evidently is a small group within the class that has a pretty bad reputation for being disruptive and have not been responsive to prior intervention.
I think we got one of that. We got that group last year, or shared at the Senate. And so you're getting ready to anticipate this subgroup.
That's in Fredonia.
Yeah, this is in Fredonia. And my other class with the seniors are, Robin has the group with the problem students, and I have the other group. And at the end of last semester, I mentioned to my group that maybe this semester we'd combine that class into one class, and my group was really adamant about not doing that. They didn't want to be combined with that group because of these problem students. So.
Oh, Lordy.
More than one problem student?
I guess
it's a crew.
Have you had them?
Yeah, we have them.
But you have. So you have them already now?
Monday.
Monday.
Start.
And they're seniors in undergrad.
Yeah.
And they're getting a BSW.
Well, both
And they'll be here next year.
Both examples lend themselves, if you're willing, to looking a little bit at, to revisiting what we called last time the preliminary phase, the tuning in phase, because you're not actually in the class. One of them is tuning in around content, and the other is tuning in around process. And the other one raised a very interesting issue of what happens when you have second-year students who know each other from the first year. Because you will have classes where somebody will walk in the door and they'll look around and say, "Oh God, he's here."
They start knowing
and already there's a reaction because the group has had a life before you started. And Joanne, yours is not like that, right? Yours is a new class, or is it first year?
Well, I've never taught it here before. I mean, I've taught research
Or
methods.
the first year students? What is the course?
Practice and program. They're second
semester. So you have a little of that.
Some of them might know each other.
Yeah, they might know each other. And that can enhance the class in many cases if the experiences were good, or start to create a real problem. I think everybody in the room has been here when we've talked about tuning in, so I won't go into a big deal about it. But it was the idea of developing preliminary empathy before the first class. And I was probably a little too quick, Joanne. I apologize when I said that's your first mistake. But what I was reacting to was the desire we sometimes have to try to sell it rather than to explore the resistance. Something we would never do in our practice. In our practice, we would explore what the resistance is all about. And that's the way to get past it. And the effort of trying to come in and convince everyone is a mistake, because then it closes off the ability for students to talk about what the resistance is all about. So that's the two things I'm hearing. The rest of you hearing that as well? And then I'm going to suggest that we might start by thinking a little bit about what it is that students will be bringing into Joanne's class that causes this class to be a source of anxiety. And then you could share some of your experiences last time about how does one address that anxiety right at the start.
Well, are you saying don't assume they have resistance, though?
No. What I'm saying is don't try to cover it by enthusiasm.
That isn't there.
Let me step back. Yes, a good teacher displays her own excitement and interest in the subject. I call it lending a vision. That's part of the framework of practice. You lend a vision of somebody who's a satisfied consumer who really has learned to like it. But you don't use that right away in the first class as a way of trying to overcome what is an awful lot of resistance and concern and anxiety. That, I think, is the mistake. Am I making sense at all on this?
So you don't know if they're going to be resistant, though, because you haven't had them.
Well, every other research method's classic.
Yes.
Assumptions.
So question one.
The logistic regression of the long likelihood of their...
Well, start by tuning in a little bit. And this would be true for any class that you were teaching. What are some of the content-related issues, and then we could tune into the process-related issues that you should be attuned to be able to address. Go back to when you first took a research course, logistic regression. Go ahead, Diane, did you want to jump in?
Oh, well, see, I think I experienced a similar thing in policy. It's like policy, oh my gosh.
It's the truth.
Yeah. And I also reacted, though, when you said, sort of like, don't be bubbly, because I was very bubbly. But see, I think I do both things. I don't know, because I had students last night. It was interesting. They said things like, I had several students who said, I don't think I really want to do social work. And then I had some students say, I hate policy. I don't see how it has anything to do with what I'm interested in. Then I had another student say, I don't like what social workers do. I want to be a therapist. It was fabulous material. I mean, it all came up with all my enthusiasm about policy. Because what I think I try to do is, I think that they don't, just the way they don't like research. I mean, they're afraid of it. They think they're going to flunk it. They think they're not going to understand it.
They've been taught women can't do math.
And that's their concern, too, about policy. Oh, I can't understand it. I'm not going to get it. Or it's boring and has no relevance. And I think some of it's fear, too. So I was bubbly and enthusiastic. But I played some games and stuff, and they introduced themselves in such a way that all that stuff came up.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So let's keep going on it. What is exactly, if you get to it, that is most fearful for them, in the research area? Policy, you get the same problems, the same issues. What is it that creates that kind of anxiety? Because everyone who teaches a research course to people always raises this issue, right at the start. Anybody? Put yourself in your...
Comments that students made to me were they were afraid they would look stupid, or that stupid, that they couldn't understand it or wouldn't, but they didn't want to appear stupid. They thought they were afraid of the math.
The language. It's a language. It's different language.
It's like a foreign language. You have to learn all the terms and meanings and concepts, and it made them anxious. They knew they had to pass it, and so that put stress on them. Because if you get below a B-, you have to take it over.
Right.
And you can't proceed on schedule. And so there's a certain pressure to pass the course, and they're afraid they won't. Also, the relevance.
Right.
The same thing that you're saying. What do I need this for? I want to be a clinician. And then you have to point all that out. But that's what they say to you. What is the point of this? I don't need this. I don't want to use it. I don't want to do research. I don't like it. So it has to do with their practice and their own personal anxiety.
Let me make a parallel, all right? Anybody work with driving while intoxicated, DWIs, mandated clients, of other types, child welfare? If you work with clients like that, what we've learned is that when we begin a group for them, for example, one of the first things we put on the table is the fact that we realize people don't want to be there.
Right.
And we address the mandated nature of it. And what we say to those clients is, for many of you, and we go through the whole list, like driving while intoxicated. Some of you are sitting here feeling that you don't have an alcohol problem, that you happen to get caught that week, and others of you feel people have it much worse. And so we say to them, my challenge, your challenge, is to be able to make this group meaningful to you, so that you feel you want to be here and that you're getting something out of it, and not just because the court said you. And anybody who addresses that issue right at the beginning and opens up the very resistance, the denial, the pre-contemplation stage that most of them are in, is going to have a much better group. Now, I think the same is true of teaching. So what happens if I'm Joanne and I begin my class and I say, look, I want to talk to you a little bit about this class and this course. There's a syllabus. They want the syllabus, And I always have this dilemma. I've learned to be very excited about research. I've learned to see how research really speaks to my practice. In fact, I get overly enthusiastic sometimes, so I have to watch that. And at the same time, I got a class full of people who don't feel the same way. Some of you are, then I'll just go right through her list. She had a wonderful list. Some of you are worried about whether you can master it. To some of you, it may seem like a foreign language. Having to get a B- in it in a class that seems challenging can be distressing. What else did you have on that list?
They were embarrassed to feel stupid.
Yeah, people feel this is the kind of course where they're not going to, and they may have experienced courses in the past where they were made to feel stupid. Now, what I'm doing is putting out, just like I would in the first session of a mandated clients course or a mandated clients program, these issues, and I'm opening up the discussion. And I'm going to say to the students, let's discuss it. Let's put it on the table. And then they're all in the same boat phenomenon is terrific. They discover they're not the only ones who are worried. So now the question is, I'm being you, if this is helpful, Joanne. So now the question is, what can we do in this class to try to address some of these real issues that you have raised? So that at the end of the semester, you might be as enthusiastic about this course as I am right now. Let's stop for now. What's the difference between that and trying to sell the course, or trying to get around it? If you're a student in that class, what are you experiencing from the faculty member?
You're getting involved immediately.
Immediately. Right on the level that you're feeling, at that point. What else are you hearing from me?
You'd be invalidated.
Validating, it's not unusual. Not the first class that goes this way. I can go back to my own experience remembering my first class. I can share that too. That's how I'm tuned into it. What else am I saying to you by putting some of that out? Right?
I care.
I care. It is important.
I do.
And you do. You do care. You're joking, but you're not joking. You're displaying interest and concern in what your students are thinking and feeling as they come into the first day to a class that they're worried about being challenging. I think that starts to develop what I call the working relationship between you and the students, that you do care about them.
Well, I've put that out there and empathized with my students before about how they might feel about being in a research or statistics class. But when you say that, like, what can we do to work together so you might find some meaning in this class and that type of thing, what are really the possible solutions? And what are they going to say? Well, let's change it to family interventions. I'm serious.
And you could say, well, if family interventions is something of interest to you, then maybe what we need to look at is how does research help to inform us to be more effective in family interventions? Because if it doesn't inform us, I'm not worried about them saying family interventions. I don't see a separation between research and interventions. I think they're integrated. Mm-hmm. So someone saying, well, let's change it to family interventions, that's a great response. We don't have to change it. What we have to look at is family interventions and what, if anything, research tells us about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking also that they may need you to connect some of those dots for them also, because I think some of the fear is the fear of the unknown and not knowing the relevance, really not knowing it, and not just going in because they can't stand it and they say they hate it. Sometimes I think they don't even know if they need it because they haven't seen the application. So maybe if you connect the dots for them in some ways, then they can become a little bit more involved in helping to solve the problem.
On a very practical level, are the assignments that you're giving, I'm not sure what the syllabus is really for this course, but are the assignments kind of practical or related to agency practice or anything like that?
Well,
where they have to write a paper, and can they choose, like if they want to do family intervention, can you relate, you're going to work, you have the option to choose a family intervention practice to focus your research work on. Do you know what I'm saying? What are you saying? Connecting the dots, but saying it practically to connect it.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the relationship definitely is there. It's just, I mean, obviously they hypothetically have to evaluate a practice, a client unit or a program, and
so they can pick a type of practice they're interested in,
or a population or a problem. Yeah.
Well, I just tell you that even though that's the case, last year when I taught that course, I still got enormous anger and resistance from the students about having to do that. There were quite a few in my section that were very, very angry till the very last day about. This is a very difficult. Like I never resolved this in this class. No, I mean, it's like I wish I could have figured it out, but and done better with it. But they were very resistant, thinking that the assignments for the class were just plain stupid and meant to make them miserable. They refused to see that it had any value.
It's just the research, steps of the research process. What would you do differently then? Because that's, largely what we're supposed to do.
That's my dilemma. I really don't know what I would have done, what I should have done differently or could have done differently. There were a couple of students. The part that really got to me maybe the most were there was one particular student who was at a placement where the program that was set up, it was one of the university clinics, was a research-oriented program. So she was really lucky in that the assignment was pretty much done for her at her site because they followed a research protocol. And she was really the most negative student there about why this whole course was not something that students should have to bother with. And I think that...
But I think, Elaine,
I'm missing the boat?
Yeah.
I know. What am I missing the boat on? Because that really bothers me.
God help us before Monday.
Yeah.
But I don't think it had anything to do with the research course. It had to do with placement. And so our students often raise indirectly issues around their placement.
You claimed it for your own.
I think I know which agency you're talking about.
Okay.
And I think it's an agency that treats students the same way it treats clients. And the model and the research model they use is not a very supportive or accepting. I'm guessing.
Yeah, you're getting warm. You sound warm.
So a student raises, why do I have to take research? When underneath what they're really saying is, I'm miserable in my placement, which is a research-oriented placement. So how do we tune into what this means? A student like this who persists. Now, most students, I think, are going to respond to your genuine efforts to try to find a connection. If you tell them things, and Marcia suggested some, like we're going to try to work out assignments so that the assignment helps you make the connection so that it's meaningful to you in your practice. Maybe we'll look at examples that are meaningful to your work in class so that we never look at a research study without also looking at the practice. There are a lot of things that can be done to make it. But if you had a student who persists, and I think I know exactly the student, and I had the same issue. Same issue.
Okay.
You got a student on a different way. Then you got to call that student in and say, what's going on? You say it's the class, but I don't think it's just the class. It's something else bugging you. What is it that's bugging you? And what you'll find, odd that 9 times out of 10, is that there's a field problem or some other issue, and this is the only and probably not the appropriate way to raise it with you. That was certainly true in my case. The other problem is, I think Elaine and all of us fall into the same trap, which is we take complete responsibility for the outcome of our teaching. Come on, we don't do that in practice. Why are we doing it in teaching? I'm going to have students, you're going to have students, and no matter how hard or how well you teach, you're not going to reach for one reason or another in their lives. I'll do the best job I can, I would call that student in and confront that student to find out what's going on. Maybe that's the only other thing I might want to do. But that student also had a responsibility to handle that problem differently. They could have raised it. Now, in the second year, I've had a student, it could be the same student, and when I did the evaluation with them at the end of the semester, they said, well, I didn't want to raise it, because if I raised it, they'd put me in another field placement, and I wouldn't finish in May. They were afraid to raise it. That was interesting. Understand? They were afraid to raise it, and so they were raising it indirectly, but I was missing it because they were talking about the course. It was really placement. That turned out. I didn't get that to the end of the class. Doorknob therapy. With the hand on the door. I finally figured out what that was. Please.
How much of it, I mean, I'm thinking that culture of negativity regarding research, I mean, it was there when I was, I mean, how much of this has to do with the culture of that class? And just, I mean, students talk about it in human behavior, they talk about how much they hate research methods. And, I mean, it's like this big stinky elephant in the middle of the room, and they do all talk about it, actually. They don't ignore it. They all talk about it.
It's not invisible.
But it's not, sometimes I wonder if it takes on a life of its own and it becomes...
You're supposed to hate it.
Yeah, you're supposed to hate it. The assumption is you're going to be horrible at it. It doesn't have any relevance.
And if you feel any differently, you keep quiet because you feel you're violating the norms.
And so is there a piece of art when Joanne's going and talking that has to be also recognizing that this isn't just like a this semester, this class kind of issue?
Right. It's not, for sure. You're absolutely right.
Like
and students in the second semester going into that class have probably been told already they're not going to enjoy it. They've already been prepared, not to enjoy it or not to really experience it.
You're going to hate it. It's going to be hard. You're not going to do well.
I also think that it's not just our responsibility. I think that's why I was saying before, I asked the question, you asked, well, what are some of the answers? I asked, what can we do to try to deal with these issues that I just put on the table and you all agree? I want the class to take some responsibility. I want them to come up with some suggestions other than not teaching research. What can we do that will help address your fears, your anxieties, your concerns? How about we make an agreement? These are some of the kind of rules that we create in this organism called the group. Most of you know, I don't know if I've told everybody that I use an organismic model. Does that make sense? And I think I've told you that I've embarrassed myself at a number of conferences that didn't come out quite the right way. But it's a model, right? But it's a model that sees the class, organismically, as a living, breathing organism that has to develop a culture. So maybe one of the rules that comes out of this discussion that Joanne says, look, let's make an agreement. If at any point we're dealing with something in this class that has to do with research, and at that point you really can't see any of you. You can't see the connection. You're lost. Say something. You're probably not the only one lost at that point. That will help me help you make those connections. Now, do you understand what I'm doing with them? I'm asking them to take some responsibility as a student, to work with me to overcome the understandable barriers that they feel or they experience. I think that's often left out. And I'm not going to take responsibility. If I give them my best shot, I'm not crying them out over that particular student. Also, you may have students in your class in the second year who are concentration related, and that sometimes you have to pick up. That the ones who are negative or complaining or complaining because of a particular concentration area or courses they're taking together, and that's a little more delicate because then you have to learn how to deal with that. I also think as a faculty member you have a responsibility to use input from your students. The model I use in practice is the social workers in the middle between the clients and the agency, this mediation notion. And so as information comes from my clients about the services, I have a responsibility to try to have professional impact on my agency. I use the same model as a teacher. This Thursday, tomorrow, you will be at the faculty meeting in which you noticed on the agenda that I have put on the agenda a student feedback form. Last time we did this was 1991. And not 2001, sorry. Work on that one, Larry. What's going on? You've been decades back. But anyway, so after I heard some of the concern, and after I heard the students say they were afraid to raise this was at the last class last semester, I said, I'm going to take some responsibility to bring this to the faculty, because clearly we have not had a medium for you to give feedback around how you're experiencing the school in a way that is confidential. Because we went to a different form for reaccreditation. So I'll be handing out copies of the old form. I'll be offering to help implement it. I hope all the people who talk about program evaluation on our faculty will now be open to us evaluating our own program. Understand? So what I had to convey to my students was, I'm not going to solve all those problems, but I have responsibility as a faculty member to find a way to feed that back. And I think that form, if we all agree, will be a good way that your students can give some feedback on some of the things they're experiencing that they've only let us know indirectly. Am I making sense on that? Now, it's easier for me. I'm a full professor with tenure. I'm admitting that right away. As you get more secure, you feel more secure about doing this. I will try to handle this in a positive manner. I've already alerted people who need to know that I'm raising it, and hopefully the students who were in my class last semester will see sometime in February probably that I did follow up and that their feedback was important and the school is going to pay attention to some of the problems, and then it won't have to be acted out in the class. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense at all, Ray? Mm-hmm. Joanne, has this been helpful to you at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you raise a good point, too, because, for example, about being full professor with tenure, but, by the fact that we are in a different position and looking at when taking on a class to teach, whether we've taught it before or not, the syllabus and the assignments and things like that are supposed to be fairly uniform. I mean, you're really not supposed to, differ in many ways at all on your assignments and the syllabus. So my syllabus looks a lot like I'm sure what your syllabus did, and that's why I said to you, what would you do differently, having struggled with that before? I think the projects, the assignments are relevant, and it's really a matter of luring them in and finding the meaning and sharing some enthusiasm about that. But I'd be interested to try to come up with something that could maybe polish that in a way that keeps it similar enough to the uniform syllabus we're supposed to have, but at the same time could improve somehow.
I bet not all the students are going to be negative when you meet them. Some of them actually liked research the first semester. They may not know what the second semester consists of, and so they're a little anxious because they don't know what they're getting into. But I would bet some of them are not coming in as negative as we're saying. Some of them ended up that first semester actually seeing the relevance and liking it.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're all going to come in negatively, and especially coming off of research methods, it won't be completely new to them. But the other thing is that, misery can love company, and when you talked about the little those little
cliques,
nasty cliques from the senior year,
to deal with.
They sometimes don't drop that.
Yeah, and they can influence the whole.
Diane wanted to jump in, and then let's talk about the senior year cliques. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
I just want to ditto what you said about connecting the dots, because I really do think I think it's important everywhere, but I find that is especially true in policy and research, because I often think that, those dots connecting are very apparent. Like when I look at something, everything has to do with policy. But it's not. It startles me sometimes about how it really is not apparent to students.
That's true.
Even when it's the examples that scream the loudest. So I found myself last night, especially with some of the comments that students had shared, that when they had brought up stuff in their places of employment and also in their lives. So then I did a lot of that, connecting the dots with them. That is impacted by such and such policy. Did you know that's impacted by this policy? And I think that helps them. And I think it helps them in research, having them bring in those areas that they're really interested in and seeing how it's relevant.
When I did my doctorate, it was in Ed Psych, and one of the great advantages I had was I could take a whole course on Dewey. Remember that name? Totally misunderstood. And again, because we have different groups, I don't always remember what I said when, so you're going to have to forgive me. But one of the things Dewey said, which is really, Diane, what you're saying, and this is the roots of it, he said knowledge doesn't exist. That's a very strange idea. What do you mean knowledge? A whole library down the hall. He says, for the student, knowledge doesn't exist. The student has to create the knowledge, and your job is to help them. So we've got the assumption that because we've learned it, we've integrated it, we now understand these concepts, we see all of this stuff, that we can just hand it over to them. No, they got to create knowledge from scratch. Now, that's a very dramatic idea that Dewey came up with. And what it meant was, if I got up right now, I'd do my 3 circles. I'd put you, the teacher, down here. I'd put your students up here, and I'd put the knowledge over here. And now our job is to help the students create for themselves that knowledge. Now, of course, we have experience. There is a library. Other people have written about it. There are all tools they can use. But the biggest single mistake we make is to assume, because we understand this complicated concept, that they're going to have to go through every single step we went through to get there. We can speed the process up. That's all we can do. If you're a good teacher, you can speed it up for them and help them get there faster. Am I making sense on the business of knowledge not created, not existing? It's a stunning idea. But it changes teaching dramatically. As soon as you realize it doesn't exist, so you can't hand it over. They got to create it.
They're young. They're so, I mean, I know I'm not an old lady, but compared to me, they're really, really young.
They're very young, yeah. PSWs particularly.
Well, even the master's students who are coming in, I mean, the average age in my class last semester was like 23.
You think they look young to you?
They look to me. They don't even have like the application to make to practice experience. It's a clean slate.
Let's do a little work on Cliques, because I think it could be connected to the issue of resistance. What can you tell us about this group, Robin? Because this question is Cliques. So what is it about this that we ought to know to be helpful to Elaine?
Well, I think what's helpful to know is we get a lot of students from a local community college they come in as like an advanced standing type of position. So they've had an internship and they've had some human service courses. So traditionally what happens every year is there's a little clique that comes in, and it's kind of like the JCC versus the Fredonia students. And it's really hard to try and integrate that. So that's where a lot of that comes, and I see it every year with the new students. One of the other things is it's this older versus younger students. Okay, the older students tend to talk more, participate, and the other students see that as very threatening, kind of shuts them down. But this particular group that Elaine's talking about, they're just very, very good friends. And they do, the eye rolling whenever someone is over here talking or participating, or they're text messaging each other, which I nixed very quickly last semester, or simply just talking to each other. They think it's okay. Part of what I struggle with, and I don't know because I haven't taught at the master's level, is there's a sense of entitlement and this lack of respect that I have a really hard time with, because there's professors that I work with. I still call Dr. Sinden, and he keeps telling me, we work together, you have to call me Pete, you have to stop this. But I don't see any of that, and that's really hard. And Elaine coming in new with this particular group, I can see that's very challenging, or it will be challenging, because they look for any point of weakness as a professor, that if you show anything like you're confused or scattered or not organized for the day, they jump on it. It can make it really stressful.
We'll get you a dominatrix out.
Okay.
We want that on tape, Steve.
That was Diane.
What efforts, if any, Robin, have been made to confront this with them? Do you know? Has anybody actually sat down with this group of students and said, I want to talk to you about this? The talking in the class, for example, the eye rolling. Has anybody ever actually, in their course, this is what last year? So they've been in the program at least 2 years?
Yes.
In the program? Do you know if anybody's ever actually tried to do anything about it?
Well, this semester I confronted the eye rolling, I think specifically with Stephanie, with the eye rolling and the talking, and because I've just kind of gotten really frustrated with it, and they'll just stop. They kind of give you a look like, who are you? And the next class, it continues again.
What's interesting though then? What do the evaluations then look like later? After they are the ones that have problem behavior in class, and then, the evaluations come back looking like what?
Teacher evaluations? I haven't had any negative teacher evaluations with this particular group.
You're surprised I'm not.
Well, and in fact, I give 2 evaluations. There's one evaluation that I've made up just through looking through a few books where it actually puts some responsibility on them in the evaluation, about how often you attend class, how often, how often you participate in class, that kind of gets both sides of the coin instead of just, what's Professor Saunders like. So that's been helpful. It's taught me a little more. But I really, honestly, and I'm not like I'm, tooting my own horn, but I have not gotten low evaluations. So.
What's the racial composition of the group and the class, socioeconomic status of the group? Is there a difference?
No, there really isn't.
Between community college and Fredonia? I'm not familiar with Fredonia.
No. I mean, they're very, very homogeneous. It's actually quite shocking how homogeneous they are. Ethnically, socioeconomically, I mean, it's really very similar.
Which makes it difficult because when issues of diversity come up and you're trying to discuss that in the classroom, boy.
What happened?
They're just, they don't understand. I mean, if I was to try and discuss, which has been difficult for me to do, gay and lesbian issues, they don't even understand where I'm talking about. You'll have these people over here that feel different, this way. They don't understand. Then they think that you're pushing something on them, or
gay agenda.
Yes. Issues of race. I mean, some of the things that have come out of people's mouths. I mean, they think it's this black-white thing. That's how they think of diversity: black or white, not.
How they think of
nothing in between.
Right.
So you're also describing there's been failures along the way. Because you're talking about seniors.
Yes.
And by that point, you expect they would have addressed some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you're inheriting a lot of unfinished business. And maybe in some ways it's the last call for help before they graduate. And there was somebody to deal with it.
Bachelor's.
BSW. They plan.
Yeah, that's scary.
Do they plan to get an MSW or to work at the BSW level?
Most of them plan to go on.
Really? What did you say? I'm so curious. What did you say to the eye-rolling people? How did you handle that?
Well, at first I thought they don't think I'm seeing this, and I thought, oh no, that's meant for me to see. So actually, what I said is, I think I might have, because in my seminar there's like 8 or 9 of us in the one seminar class. So I think I just said to the one girl, Stephanie, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Why? Well, you rolled your eyes. So I think you have thought about something that's going on or something that kind of, came about. And because it was her little clique that's in there, I felt comfortable at that point, and I've known them long enough where I was going to kind of call her out on it because it had happened. It just happens over and over and over. And I walk out of the class and I thought, okay, maybe I should have done that in my office. But there's also part of me that's like, they're like 20, 21 years old. Grow up. You want to be a social worker. Right. You have to be able to deal with some of this stuff. And I think so many times we try and dance around things. And I think that's where we get into the problems with these students that we do.
So it's hard, isn't it? Because what you have to do is partialize out the behavior. We know that behavior in the group is always group related. And we know there's an authority theme in the group. And this will be Benson Shepherd. I'll come back to them later at another time. Relating to you as a symbol of authority. You've got 21-year-olds who are different. They're still working on issues of relation to parents and issues of authority. Then you got the intimacy theme, relation to each other. And you've got both. You've got the subgroups in terms of the conflict internally and the issues of conflict and how you deal with authority externally. The hard part, I think, is to be able to sort out, you don't get it right away, what portion of the behavior is, in this case it sounds like 3 young women, am I correct? 4 young women? 4 young women. What portion of the behavior is simply saying, I'm still immature, and this is what we did in high school, no one's called me on it, and I need a faculty member to get me to come into the office and say, time to grow up. What portion is that? And then what portion is related to the class or other unfinished business? Are they inappropriately dealing with me as a symbol of authority because they don't know how to take me on openly? Maybe if they take me on openly, I put them down, or maybe when they express views that are not acceptable, I give them a hard time. If that's a piece of it, then you've got to have a discussion as early as possible about how free do they feel to disagree with you. I mean, if they disagree with you and they just roll their eyes, then that's not a good way or a mature way of expressing disagreement. Do they feel intimidated? You're a grader. You're the person who's going to be grading them. I think my students feel. I wrote their book. Are they going to take me on some of these ideas? I have to work my tail off, literally, to get them to treat me as somebody other than a symbol of authority. So how much of it is dealing with authority and doing it appropriately and trying to create a culture in the class where if they disagree, don't roll your eyes.
Right.
Disagree.
Right, but do it appropriately.
But do it appropriately. How much of it is immature, in this case people who are carrying over a pattern, sounds like high school, right? And someone needs to tell them to grow up. I don't know. How much it is situation? Like, it would be interesting. You're all hearing music right now. It would be interesting to look at what were the comments by other students or you or the moments in the class that tended as a pattern to generate that eye roll. In other words, is there a pattern in here that's telling us there is something that is also related to content? So I got 3 areas now: intimacy, relationship to other students and some of the subgrouping that goes on, authority, relation to me, and the ability to talk to me directly, not just as a teacher. And I think undergraduates have more trouble doing that. Graduates get a little better at it, but even in the beginning, the graduate students have trouble doing that. And then finally, content related. Now, I don't know.
What I think is interesting, though, is a couple of these girls, one in particular, it's almost like she has this role that she's kind of...
She does.
It's kind of like a class clown, but she's not a clown, but it's kind of like, like this ditzy thing. Because when she's in my office and she's sitting with me, it's like...
It's different.
It is a totally different person.
Yeah. So if you ever sat there in your office, how come when you're in my office you're this person, and when you're in class, you're this different person?
I have said that.
What's she saying?
Because what was happening in class, she was saying like she didn't understand things and all this doesn't make sense. And then she'd sit in my office and we'd have a conversation about it, and I'd say, okay, now write what you just said. I said, because you have it. I said, you can articulate that beautifully to me. I said, why can't you do that in class, and why can't you do that in your writing?
And what did she say?
I don't know.
Yeah. And what do you think?
I just think that when she's in front of this group, she has this...
Did you say that?
No, I did not say that.
You understand what I'm saying? So when you say to her, why can't you do this in class? It sounds like you're being critical of her for not doing what she has the ability to do. You're not saying to her, why don't you do this in class? What's going on in this class? I mean, that causes you to act like this. You're not this. You're not this. What is it? You're not confronting it. You're right on target, but you're holding it back. So why do we hold it back? Why don't we confront our students and try to get at what's going on in that class that's causing that behavior, which is not necessarily her outside of the class. We're right there. Understand? So what stops Robin or any of us from saying, no, when she says, well, I don't know, what stops us from doing what we would do with a client? With a client, we would say, look, I got a hunch. I think you're in there with the group. You get a lot of approval for that. And it's a lot of group pressure to say things like that, not to say you know what's going on. We don't do it with our students. And yet it's exactly what I think we would do with a client. Am I off on that, or am I making any sense? Yeah. I think we need, and I'm going to start next month. It's not that month, Marie. It's the second week of February, I think. It's about the 8th of February, because it's time to the faculty meetings. Whenever we have a faculty meeting, we have the Wednesday, because that's when I'm definitely here, because I don't teach regularly in the winter spring semester. I have other assignments. Okay, so I think we're going to start to look at this group, because if you're looking at this group from the point of view of a group theorist, this behavior is fully understandable. How subgroups develop in groups all the time, how people develop norms, and this subgroup has its own norm, and how people take on roles. You said it's like she has a role in the class. She certainly does. She has a role in the class. That's what we have to confront. Am I making sense on this at all, Rebecca?
I'm just wondering about the issue. Did we miss the issue of the possible stuff going on between the two sites, the JCC, the Fredonia site, and has that ever been addressed? This has been a long-standing kind of conflict, it sounds like.
It has been addressed, but
I don't really understand it, because you said they were a homogeneous group.
As far as their ethnic background, their socioeconomic status.
What is the conflict about?
The conflict
I'm not familiar with
the conflict
schools,
is that the students of Fredonia think that the JCCers know more, and so they have an edge on them. And the JCC people come in, oh, well, I did that. I know what, I had an internship, or I had this, or I did this. And so they participate a little more and have a little more to share.
So now we're in the very first class, and we're going around having introductions. And probably most of us say, can you say a little bit something about your past experiences that will help connect? And we got the JCC people saying, well, I did this, I did that, and the other half of the group is shrinking, right, as they're listening. Again, this is a wonderful opportunity if we want to use it right in the first class. I'm watching, and look what's happening. I've seen this before. JCC people come in with some experience, and the people from Fredonia sit there thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do as well as they did. And it comes out in class. Am I making sense at all? You know, and I've seen this happen over and over again. I'd like to see if we can find a way to make this class not a JCC group that talks all the time, and a Fredonia group that is afraid to speak. You've seen it. What stops us from being direct about it? I understand what stops us. But go ahead. What is it?
Well, I actually had another thought.
Go ahead, Mom.
Okay.
Well,
okay, I'll say what stops it is it's just scary because you're thinking, am I on target?
Right.
Or am I missing this? Right. Should I really say this?
So what do you do with a client when you're not sure? Understand? What do you do with a client? You got a client group. You say, look, I may be off target on this, but let me tell you what I'm sensing right now. Don't you do that with clients? Why don't we use what we've learned with clients and families and groups and attach that now to our educational role? I'm not suggesting you're going to have an encounter in class. Students don't want that. And we're not going to spend all our class time talking about how we relate to each other in the group. But we know how to do that with clients. Do we remember, does everybody remember how hard it was at first with clients? You had a field supervisor who probably helped you begin to get a little more courageous and to take a risk, because at the beginning you weren't able to do it. So you're regressing back. That's what you're doing. You're regressing back because teaching's new. And so you're forgetting what you learned as a skillful practitioner, and you're not using it with your class. Your gut instincts are right on target all the time. It's so amazing. When she says to me, she's sitting there thinking, this student's playing a role in class. They're right on target. But we don't say it to the students.
Now, can they... Can you have them talk to each other straight out? You know, like first class, have the JCC students talk to the
I always do.
students?
First class. Never get around the room. I have young students in graduate programs now with very little experience and people who've done groups like out of their kazoo. And as the introductions go, you can just see it in their faces. And I just call it right at the beginning. And then the issue is, how do we make sure this class is meaningful for those of you who have had experience, but at the same time meaningful to those of you who are bringing lack of experience. What I also find is the more mature students, usually the ones coming back from work, are the ones who are most anxious about the academics. And they're usually sitting there thinking all these young academics right out of college, they're going to be able to handle papers. So their anxiety comes out by expressing all their experience. The other anxiety comes out by saying things like, well, I've just been a housewife. You know, as if they haven't had any, or a parent, you know, I've only raised kids, I haven't worked, as if that isn't going to be relevant. I think it's discussed in first class. It's a wonderful discussion, not to the whole class, but it's a wonderful way to ease the tension and to help people realize it. I also will say to students, I say, well, let's make a deal. Those of you who are used to talking a lot in class, why don't you work on not talking so much? And those of you who are used to keeping quiet, like you've never said a word, throughout your college career, why don't you work on trying to speak a little more? And I'll monitor it, and I'll try to help those of you who have trouble speaking. I'll help you get in. And those of you who have trouble containing yourself, I'll try to help you contain yourself. What have I just done about what is often a very powerful issue? What have I just done with it by putting it on the table?
Change rules. Change rules.
But also, does it now become an issue that instead of all of us after class, we go out and we say, "Can you believe she never stopped talking?" You know, instead of doing it after class, I've said right in class, this is something we have to work on. Are you hearing that over and over again? Not just me. I don't have to fix all these things, but I do have a responsibility to ask my class students to address them and to fix them. I often get a student to quiet. Christine, is that making sense?
Yeah, that's, you know, I don't know how many times you have to tell me that before I get it through my head.
Look at what Christine's going through now. She's starting in a new institution, right, with a new group, and she's already been told, get ready, you're in trouble. She hasn't even met the students. No wonder your anxiety.
But you know, I do have to say, they're not. It's not a bad group, and I caution that also because when teachers in history pass, you know, they pass on the word that this is like a horrible crew. You may have a completely different experience, just like a client might with a therapist, and I think that's really important to understand because a lot of the stuff that I get our professors coming to me and saying, "Oh, here we go," and I may never have a student with or a problem with that student, or they might be one of my favorite students, and I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Because I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing the problem.
It's like the first day in the field work when they ask the new student, your student, and they say, who are they giving you for your assignment? Oh, they got me working with the Brown family. They gave you the Brown family. The student had never even met the Brown family. And so I start off on the subject there's strength there. I think this information helps me tune in. It helps me prepare. It also helps me strategize some ways in which I can directly address this. And if I see the JCC Fredonia thing coming out, I say, I heard about this. The JCC, there's Fredonia, there are people more experienced, people with less experience. I've taken away, I think, some of the taboo around open discussion of it. And I've asked the students to start take some responsibility. I just wish I could convey to you, if nothing else, you know more about teaching than you realize.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you remind me of something when you say that, and it comes back to what Robin was raising about the cliques and that type of thing. And one of the issues, I mean, there are a number of issues, and obviously one that you said was relationship to authority, and the professor's authority or lack of potential perceived authority, because if the students are so young in many of the instances and they don't perceive you as having authority, what you said may or may not matter. Like you said, we're the teachers, we know more about this than anyone else here, and we can, teach on it in our sleep and that kind of thing. But, it's all about that perceived authority, and we're all obviously different ages in here, and the interesting thing is that your age can reflect an authority. And this reminds me of one time, do you remember, Bonnie? A few years back, you said to me, when I was thinking about going to the PhD program and teaching at UV, and Bonnie said they're going to eat you up alive.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes, and that just lays an interesting foundation.
You just remind me so much of, people used to say at work, use what you have. And I used to use when I was younger. I didn't have the age so much, but I was tall. And I wore 3-inch heels.
I like the dominatrix outfit. I think I'm still back there.
But I didn't need the outfit. I just would stand up in my heels and be taller than most everyone. And for some reason, a very tall woman, people treat you differently. You use what you have.
But in the end, the respect will come when you show them respect. When you're honest with them, when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, which is the hard part. And I'll summarize because it's 6 o'clock. All right. Look what you're teaching them about work with clients. You're teaching them everything they need to know about work with clients. About being honest, about confronting things, about talking about process, about dealing with the authority theme, which they're going to have with clients. Understand? They're going to be very young. Clients are going to have difficulty relating to them. They're probably in the process of your class raising a whole bunch of issues that are crucial for their learning experience. Only they raise them in ways like yours do. Raise them in ways that are so hard to understand. I think after a while, after you've seen it often enough, you see it more clearly. Just like in your practice, after you've done it enough. The other thing is, I think one of the things we learned last year for sure, it was so powerful in this workshop, was when we got those midterm evaluations. And I'm going to raise that at the faculty meeting as well, that people do not get their midterm evaluations. You and others, who else did it? Not just you, but who else? Dwayne, who else? Christine?
Yeah.
Yeah. They took
Kelly did.
They took those midterm evaluations with all the warts and all the problems. They brought them into class.
And that was so helpful.
It was so helpful. And they said to the class, look, this is what some of you felt. I want to talk about this. I'd like to make sure the class works better. The students were so respectful of them, and I don't think it would have mattered if they were tall or short. They were respectful of them, that they came in, and those students said, you're the first faculty member at this school who's ever come and told us about the, remember? First one who ever came and told us. So that's where I think the respect will come.
I think I remember that, and it was so
powerful.
I learned so. I wasn't teaching then, but I learned so much from that when you all went through that. And I was hoping that we would have it last term, and it.
Well, I'm going to raise it because we're not getting it.
It was so helpful.
Because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, after that I started making up my own, though. I make up my own to make sure I get the feedback.
Make sure you get it. And students really respect the fact that the teacher cared enough to come in and talk about the warts
Yes.
and the problems. And you learn from those conversations.
Sure did.
And you,
You
were able
do.
and you enhance yourself as a teacher. The same will be true with these students. Thank you for the examples. I think they were terrific. What a great start. And I will do some preparatory work for next time around us expanding a little bit. Maybe Benison Shepherd might be good because that deals with the beginning stage of groups, the development of the authority theme and the intimacy theme. Maybe I'll do a little on that for next time. Thanks again, Steve.